Hello and welcome to the Wealth and Wisdom with the Market Guys. I'm James DeGiorgia.
And I'm Jeff Garbaz. On today's show, we're going to discuss thematically investing during a market downturn in microcap stocks. Joining us today is David Weinstein. David has more than 20 years experience with U.S. investment banking firms. He's held his current position since April 2005. Prior to joining Dawson James Securities, Mr. Weinstein was Director of Research for National Securities Corporation, and prior to that, Joseph Charles and Associates. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, David.
My pleasure to be here.
I mean, it's pretty obvious with the chaos that's occurred in the financial markets that there has to be some bargain someplace. And logically, one can only conclude that small companies are finding it hard to raise cash. People are, moving out of more risky things like microcaps into more blue chip investments. So that has to be an opportunity.
No question about it. When we look at the lowest tier of the market, the capital, just like the ocean, is pulled away, and it just leaves the stocks lying on the beach. And one of our jobs in corporate finance is we go out and see what's out there, and of course, it's a reverse cycle. So right now, the best deals from a corporate finance standpoint are sitting before us, as opposed to the worst deals when the market was peaking.
It seems to me that when we talk about microcaps, we're talking about some of the hottest technology, the hottest paradigm shift scientific opportunities. There's a lot of the things that we do in food and science and homeland security and pharmaceuticals start as microcaps.
No question. I mean, one thing that the public needs to understand about microcaps and the public markets is these companies are generally not financeable. They can't go to the bank and borrow. If you have a new invention on a way to make better fuel, make food safer, a new drug that might be used to treat cancer, you're not going to go to Wells Fargo and borrow money. You're going to go to an investment banker who's going to go out to the public and raise money, and you're going to trade as a stock. That's all well and good when the stock market's doing great. But when the stock market begins to falter, the first group to go down are the small stocks, and they're usually the last ones to go up. So we're at a cycle now where these stocks have been in a downturn for 18 months. So you've got valuations that they're just dwarfed compared to what they were when these companies raised money.
Yet, so this is some of the most promising businesses in America. One of the companies that we were discussing before the show, of course, has to do with a paradigm shift in the way that we raise fish for public consumption. Can you tell us a little bit about that company? And that company, by the way, is a Florida company.
That is. The name of that company, again, was Neptune Industries. Neptune Industries basically is looking at a way to raise fish in a closed containment system, which essentially is a floating receptacle. What's so unique is that that system catches the fish waste and then utilizes to grow organic hydroponic vegetables. The idea is nature is a cycle, and if we can recreate the cycle where one species food is another species waste and vice versa, we can have an efficient system.
Before that, of course, the problem with raising large fish farms was that the excrement couldn't be filtered out. So farming millions of pounds of fish wasn't practical. This process promises to be, the solution to that problem?
It's an attempt to solve that problem. You probably heard that in Chile there are enormous outbreaks of disease, and this is caused by the fact that the salmon farms in Chile and Norway and Canada, where the fish are raised, they're raised in nets. So when they go to the bathroom, the waste goes right to the bottom, which gives birth to bacteria and disease, which comes back in and catches the fish in the net. So we need to have a paradigm shift in how we raise fish.
Well, there's also another side problem, which is that it then creates algae off of the fish, and there's opportunities there. We're hearing lots of stuff in the U.S. now about how corn production is being diverted to ethanol, and there's opportunities here as well.
Well, we think that algae is probably the most promising source for biodiesel. The Department of Energy ran a 20-year study which concluded in 1996, and it showed that it was far superior to ethanol and every other type, including switchgrass, of methods of raising for biodiesel. So right now there's probably 15, 20 companies looking to commercialize algae. And they're very, very interesting technologies.
Will the oil companies allow this to happen, and are the oil companies involved in the research on this?
The first oil company that made an investment was Chevron, and it was 2 months ago in algae. Let's understand that algae represents a paradigm shift for the oil companies. So on the one hand, politically, it's not. They don't like the idea, but the flip side of the equation is if it works and we don't do it, it's going to be done overseas. So if we look at the non-OPEC producing nations that are dependent on oil like we are, small countries like, say, Colombia or Panama, they might be the next source, and they'll be exporting that biodiesel to the United States.
How much water do you really need to produce algae of enough bulk so that you can actually make a dent in this this energy problem that we're having?
According to the Department of Energy, you can use 1/3 of the desert in New Mexico to supply all the energy needs of the United States. You can actually grow algae in smokestacks without water, believe it or not. So there are many ways to do it. One of the companies in Florida is actually doing it in quarry lakes. You don't have to do it in lakes. You can do it in what we call bioreactors, which essentially are tubes where the algae grows. It's very water efficient ways of doing it.
So when you look at a company like this, are you buying or investing in a company like this as a proxy to invest in the technology? Or is this a company, something that can grow and actually become a NASDAQ-listed company, produce fish, produce algae, and become a growing concern?
If we're talking about Neptune Industries, they basically have a very simple proposition. They're operating a farm in South Florida near the Everglades in Florida City, and that's basically a demonstration site. They do intend to grow it to cash flow positive. They're growing hydroponic vegetables. They're using a variety of methods of raising fish, hybrid striped bass. But at the end of the day, if they really succeed, they'll be able to take their system, the aquasphere, and they'll be able to roll that out across the world as a potential paradigm shift in fish rearing systems. And conversely, their other product, which is insects for fish food, theoretically could replace fish meal. And we're waiting for the USDA to declare the organic standard in the next 4 years. And when they do that, they're going to tell fish farmers worldwide, if you want to have an organic fish, what you can feed it. And we believe that insects will be one of the proven fish foods, whereas the current predominant protein that fish eat, which is fish meal, is likely to be excluded because it's ground up wild fish, and if it's a wild fish, you don't know what it ate.
Well, this kind of transitions into kind of one of our topics we're going to continue with, which is looking at food technology and how we're working directly with China. And obviously, we produce a lot of, I recall from our last show, you had stated, I believe, that we produce something like 500 million pounds of fish in the U.S., and we import about almost 9 billion pounds of fish. And obviously, some of that comes from China, and there's all sorts of issues. How do you view our relationship with China as it relates to food? I think that would be very interesting for our viewers to hear about.
Okay, I call this a reciprocal proposition. China's got an issue. Their water is essentially polluted on the mainland. Obviously, China's a very large country, and there are places where the water is fine, like Hainan Island. Hainan Island is their paradise in China. But as a U.S. consumer, when you go to the supermarket, you don't know if that fish was raised in Hainan Island, and you don't even know where Hainan Island is or what it is. So the question is, how do countries like China, Vietnam, Argentina, Chile, how do these countries, which might have problems in U.S. perception, now that when you go to the supermarket, each fish is labeled country of origin? So if there's a stigma associated with China, for instance, how do we overcome that? That's the question, right? And it's the question for the Chinese, too, because in general, Americans, not just Americans, Europeans, other countries, we don't believe that the Chinese inspecting the Chinese gives us a credible solution to our problem is, I want to eat food that's not tainted. So one of the companies, Global Food Technologies, has developed a system which basically purifies or kills off all the pathogens in the food, and then they stamp it with their label, which is iPura. Now they're intending to create a paradigm shift in the way we buy food. So if you've got one fillet from China that says nothing, and the second one says iPura, you know that a U.S. company has gone over there, put its clean room in, done its antimicrobial kill, vacuum packed it, and stamped it iPura. So they're essentially replacing what the government agencies are doing. The U.S., the FDA only inspects 2% of the seafood coming into this country. So it means nothing that it got in here. So if they're successful in branding iPura, then they've got a reciprocal proposition where, for the first time that I've seen, a U.S. company becomes invaluable to a Chinese company for the Chinese company to sell back into the U.S. markets.